Picture this. Russia has about 65 submarines lurking beneath the world's oceans, and they're not exactly built for sightseeing tours. These underwater machines are designed to scare enemies, sometimes by just existing. After all, the thought that one of them might be hiding close by, with nuclear missiles ready to fire, is enough to make any country nervous. That's the whole point. Intimidation. But when the intimidation tool itself starts falling apart, that's when things get embarrassing. That's exactly what just happened. Vladimir Putin's pride took another hit after one of Russia's submarines, supposedly one of its quiet killers, broke down in a place that couldn't be more awkward, right where NATO forces keep watch. Instead of projecting power, Russia ended up showing weakness. On September 28th, news outlets like the Economic Times reported that the Novorossiysk, a Kilo-class submarine from Russia's Black Sea Fleet, ran into serious trouble while on duty in the Mediterranean. Nobody really knows what the mission was supposed to be, but it doesn't even matter anymore. The sub went from predator to sitting duck in no time. The problem? A major technical breakdown, reportedly linked to a massive fuel leak. Think of it like a car stranded on the side of the highway, except this car is a 242-foot war machine carrying 52 people, stranded in the Strait of Gibraltar. And unlike a car, there's no repair shop nearby that can fix it. The situation is so bad that the submarine crew can't fix the damage themselves. Why? Because they don't have the spare parts on board, and none of them are trained to deal with a disaster this big. Even if they did have the know-how, they're essentially patching up a sinking ship with duct tape. It just wouldn't work. That leaves Russia scrambling to figure out how to rescue its stranded sub before the worst-case scenario unfolds. And the worst case? An explosion. Reports from Russian sources on the Telegram channel VCHKGPU, later cited by TVP World, describe fuel spilling directly into the interior of the submarine. That means the crew is basically living inside a metal tube with diesel slowly pooling around them. While diesel isn't as quick to ignite as gasoline, the danger is still real. One spark, one electrical short, one careless mistake, and the whole vessel could go up in flames. For now, the only small comfort is that diesel has a relatively high ignition point, which lowers the odds of it catching fire just from the warm, cramped environment of the sub. But comfort doesn't last long when you're trapped underwater with leaking fuel and no way to fix it. Russia likes to brag about its submarine fleet. With roughly 65 of them in service, these underwater giants are supposed to be one of the sharpest arrows in Vladimir Putin's military quiver. They're built to lurk silently beneath the waves, tracking enemy ships, launching missiles if needed, and, most importantly, reminding the world that Russia can strike from the shadows. For decades, this has been part of Moscow's intimidation playbook. The uncertainty of where a submarine might be is often more frightening than what it's actually doing. But intimidation only works if your war machines actually work. And right now, Russia's carefully crafted image of strength just cracked wide open. The incident unfolded in late September, when the Novorossiysk, a Kilo-class submarine that belongs to Russia's Black Sea Fleet, found itself in serious trouble. This wasn't just any random hiccup or routine technical glitch. We're talking about a breakdown so severe that the vessel had to surface in the Strait of Gibraltar, a choke point heavily monitored by NATO. Imagine being one of Russia's most prized subs and suddenly becoming a sitting duck right in front of your biggest rivals. It's like showing up to a boxing match only to realize your gloves have fallen apart. So what exactly happened? According to reports, the submarine suffered a catastrophic failure in its fuel system. Instead of the fuel being safely contained, it began leaking inside the hull of the sub itself. Picture a car that starts dripping gasoline all over its back seat. That's essentially what happened, but with a warship carrying torpedoes, sensitive equipment, and over 50 crew members crammed into tight quarters. The Novorossiysk is about 242 feet long and runs on a diesel-electric system, which is supposed to make it one of the quieter submarines in Russia's arsenal. That quietness is its big advantage. It's meant to sneak through the seas undetected. But when your diesel fuel starts spilling everywhere, silence is the least of your worries. Now, here's where it gets worse. The crew can't fix it. They don't have the right tools, they don't have the replacement parts, and they don't have the specialists on board who could even attempt to repair this serious. Modern submarines are extremely complicated machines, far more advanced than an airplane or a tank. Every inch of them is crammed with wiring, pumps, pipes, sensors, and weapon systems. If even one of those pieces fails, you need expert engineers and specific equipment to make repairs. On the Novorossiysk, neither of those are available. That leaves Russia in a race against time. A fuel leak isn't just a maintenance issue, it's a bomb waiting to happen. Diesel itself doesn't ignite as easily as gasoline, since it needs much higher temperatures to reach its flashpoint. That gives the crew some breathing room. But inside a submarine, all it takes is one electrical spark, one overheated piece of machinery, or one accidental flame, and the entire vessel could be consumed by fire. If that happens, there's no easy escape for the 52 sailors on board. And there's a bigger symbolic problem here. Submarines are supposed to be the pride of the Russian Navy, one of the few areas where Moscow has long tried to match Western military power. A breakdown like this, especially in such a public location, signals something far worse. It suggests that Russia's naval power may not be as fearsome as it claims. This isn't just one embarrassing mishap. It's evidence of a fleet that may be crumbling under poor maintenance, lack of investment, and international sanctions that make getting spare parts even harder. Think about it. A submarine that can't even stay operational during a routine mission isn't much of a threat. Instead of making NATO sweat, the Novorossiysk is now more of a liability than a weapon. And for Putin, who leans heavily on military strength as a pillar of his political image, that kind of humiliation is hard to hide. Here's where things get really dangerous. Diesel fuel might not catch fire as quickly as gasoline, but when it does burn, it's brutal. According to experts like those at HI Excavations, diesel flames are tougher to put out than fires caused by gasoline or kerosene. Normally, firefighters would swarm ablaze with foam, chemicals, or hoses. But on a submarine, there are no fire trucks coming to the rescue. If the Novorossiysk's leaking diesel catches fire, there's really only one way it's going to be extinguished: when the submarine itself floods with seawater as it sinks to the bottom. That's not a firefighting plan. That's a death sentence. And fire isn't the only enemy here. The fumes alone are enough to make the situation life-threatening. Picture an enclosed room with no windows where liquid diesel is pooling on the floor and evaporating into the air. Even if the crew has sealed off the cargo hold to keep the leak contained, anyone who dares to step inside is basically walking into a gas chamber. The UK Health Security Agency warns that diesel fumes can cause dizziness, headaches, and drowsiness almost immediately. Breathe it in for too long, and things get much scarier. You could lose muscle control, slip into a coma, or suffer permanent heart and lung damage. That means the crew is stuck in a terrible balancing act. If they leave the fuel sealed up in the cargo hold, the air inside becomes toxic and explosive. If they open it to deal with the leak, they risk poisoning themselves or sparking a fire. Either choice could end in disaster. And here's the real kicker. Russian sources like the VCHKGPU Telegram channel, cited by TVP World, suggest that the crew might already be out of options. According to their information, the fuel inside the sub has built up so much that the crew has no choice but to start pumping it out directly into the Mediterranean Sea. Think about that for a second. On one hand, this is an environmental nightmare, spewing diesel fuel into one of the world's busiest and most fragile waterways. On the other, it's a desperate move that sacrifices the submarine's own lifeline. Diesel isn't just sitting around inside the Novorossiysk as cargo. It's the fuel that keeps the vessel alive. Pump it out, and you're draining the very resource needed to move, generate power, and survive. Even then, pumping the fuel isn't a safe fix. The more the crew fiddles with the leak, hoses, pumps, valves, the higher the chance of something sparking. Imagine sloshing around a bucket of gasoline next to a live electrical outlet. Now multiply that risk by hundreds of gallons of diesel in a cramped, pressurized steel tube. One slip, one tiny malfunction, and the Novorossiysk doesn't just break down. It becomes a fireball. Right now, that submarine is like a giant powder keg drifting in NATO's backyard. Every second that passes without a solution is another second closer to disaster, whether by fumes, fire, explosion, or sinking. The timing and location of this submarine disaster make it sting even more for Russia. The Novorossiysk didn't break down in the middle of some remote ocean where no one was watching. No, It surfaced in one of the busiest, most tightly monitored waterways in the world, the Mediterranean Sea. That's practically the front porch of NATO nations like Spain, Italy, France, Greece, and Turkey. For years, Russia has used submarines in this region to silently shadow NATO ships, spy on naval operations, and send an unspoken message: we're here and we can strike. Now, instead of projecting power, Russia's prized submarine is sputtering like a broken-down car in front of the neighbors it was meant to intimidate. For anyone following military history, this whole mess feels eerily familiar. It's hard not to think back to the year 2000, the Kursk disaster. That tragedy happened during Putin's very first year as president and left an indelible stain on his reputation. Back then, the Oscar II-class submarine Kursk was conducting exercises when a faulty torpedo exploded inside its launch tube. The blast set off a chain reaction that tore through the vessel, ultimately sending it to the bottom of the Barents Sea. Every single sailor on board, 118 men, died. What made the Kursk disaster especially horrifying wasn't just the accident itself, but how it was handled. International rescue teams rushed to offer help, but Putin flatly refused. He feared letting outsiders near the wreck would reveal too many Russian military secrets. That decision cost lives. The world watched in shock as Russian pride was placed above human survival. By the time Russia admitted it needed outside assistance, it was far too late. Now, fast forward to the present day. The Novorossiysk isn't a nuclear-powered submarine, but the situation has shades of the same old nightmare. Fuel is leaking, the crew can't fix it, and danger is literally sloshing around inside the sub. So far, the leak hasn't turned into a fire or an explosion, but it easily could. If that happens, the Mediterranean could see the worst submarine disaster since the Kursk. And just like before, there's almost no chance Putin would ever accept outside help. Back in 2000, when relations between Russia and the West were still relatively cordial, he turned NATO down. Today, in the middle of the Ukraine war, when NATO is painted by Moscow as Russia's greatest enemy, the idea of Russian sailors being rescued by NATO ships would be the ultimate humiliation. Putin's pride virtually guarantees that no Western help will be allowed anywhere near the Novorossiysk. Which means, for the 52 sailors trapped on board, survival rests solely in the hands of a struggling, overstretched Russian navy. What makes the whole picture even bleaker is that this isn't an isolated incident. Russia's navy seems to be lurching from one mishap to the next. Take the case reported by United 24 Media. A Bayan M-class missile corvette, the Vyshny Volochyok, was badly damaged after colliding with a civilian tanker in the Azov Sea. Yes, you read that right. One of Russia's supposedly modern warships slammed into a civilian vessel like a teenager rear-ending a car on their first day of driving. Between collisions and breakdowns, the threatening Russian fleet is starting to look more like a floating liability than a source of fear. The embarrassment doesn't stop with the Novorossiysk. Russia's navy has been racking up blunders that would be almost comical if they weren't so dangerous. Take what happened on August 7th with the Vyshny Volochyok, a Buyan missile corvette. According to official Russian reports, the ship had been damaged during combat tasks. That phrasing alone sounded suspicious, but then photographs leaked showing the hull gashed and bent from what looked unmistakably like a collision. Not a firefight, not an attack, a collision. If you've made it this far into the video, it means you're enjoying what we do here at Euro Bulletin. Take a second to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more updates and insights from Europe and its partners. Let's dive in more. Soon after, Moscow spun a story that Ukrainian drones were responsible, insisting the ship was still combat-ready. But the damage was obvious, and no one outside Russia bought the explanation. Admitting that one of its modern warships had literally crashed into a civilian tanker would have been too humiliating for the Kremlin to swallow. It was easier to blame invisible Ukrainian drones than to admit incompetence. That same playbook, deny, distract, blame someone else, is now unraveling again with the Novorossiysk. This wasn't some rusty relic that Russia knew was unsafe and left tied up at port. No, this submarine had been actively deployed to the Mediterranean for one specific purpose: to threaten NATO's southern flank. Either Russian commanders truly believed the vessel was fit for duty, or they suspected problems and sent it out anyway, gambling that nothing catastrophic would happen. Either way, that gamble failed. And now, instead of a silent predator lurking undetected beneath the waves, the Novorossiysk has become an international spectacle, surfaced, leaking, and possibly on its way to sinking in full view of NATO. The irony is almost painful. Submarines are supposed to embody secrecy, invisibility, the constant whisper of danger that keeps enemies awake at night. Now, the one tool meant to project stealth and power is instead showcasing Russian weakness to the world. And this isn't an isolated failure, it's part of a pattern. Russia's navy is visibly straining under the weight of poor maintenance, a shortage of spare parts, and the biting effects of sanctions that cut off access to Western technologies. Instead of fixing these problems, Moscow has been pushing its fleet out to sea anyway, risking breakdowns in order to keep up appearances. Take another example, the Kazan, one of Russia's supposedly advanced submarines. In June 2024, it was sent through the English Channel, an unmistakable show of strength right in NATO's face. But divers inspecting the vessel found pieces of its outer tiles literally falling off. These tiles aren't cosmetic. They're part of the sound-dampening layer that helps submarines remain undetectable underwater. If they're peeling away, the vessel becomes noisier, easier to track, and more vulnerable. Sure, experts like submarine analyst Marcus pointed out that even Western vessels occasionally shed tiles because adhesives weaken over time with the stress of deep-sea pressures. But the Kazan's condition raised deeper concerns. If its exterior was visibly crumbling, what did the inside look like? What other systems might be wearing down unnoticed? And remember, the Kazan isn't some relic from the Cold War gathering rust in a dockyard. It was commissioned in 2001 and had only been actively at sea for about 6 years. For a submarine of that age to be shedding parts like an old jalopy hints at something far more troubling. Not just poor upkeep, but potentially shoddy construction and declining quality in Russian shipbuilding. When you put these incidents together, the Vishny Volochyok colliding with a civilian tanker, the Kazan dropping pieces of its hull, and now the Novorossiysk threatening to go under in NATO's backyard, a picture starts to form. Russia's navy isn't the sleek, terrifying undersea force it wants the world to believe it is. It's a patchwork fleet limping along, plagued by accidents, and increasingly exposing its weaknesses to both enemies and allies alike. Russia had been eager to show off the Kazan as one of the crown jewels of its submarine fleet. When it sailed all the way to Cuba, Moscow touted the trip as proof of its global reach, parading it as a modern symbol of Russian naval power. But experts quickly noticed cracks in that image, literally. Photographs revealed sections of the Kazan's sound-dampening panels falling off. Officially, analysts said the missing tiles wouldn't cripple the submarine's operational capabilities. But others pointed out that the damage spoke volumes about the state of Russian maintenance. If your best of the best submarine looks like it's shedding its outer skin on a world tour, what does that say about the rest of your fleet? The Kazan's panel problem in 2024 might have seemed like an embarrassing sideshow at the time, but in hindsight, it was a warning. Those same maintenance failures now appear to be catching up with the Novorossiysk, whose fuel system breakdown in the Mediterranean could doom the vessel entirely. And the problems don't stop there. In August 2025, Business Insider painted a bleak picture of the Russian Navy as a whole. According to their reporting, Moscow's entire fleet is being stretched thin, and not just because of mechanical breakdowns. The Black Sea Fleet in particular has been mauled since Putin's invasion of Ukraine. A third of its ships have been damaged or destroyed by Ukrainian strikes. That's not just a military setback. It's a humiliation that undermines one of Russia's proudest branches of service. The Novorossiysk, of course, belongs to that same fleet. If it's lost, as is entirely possible, it will mark another painful blow to a force already fighting for relevance. But the implications go far beyond a single submarine. The real issue is what this means for Russia's global posture. For years, Russia has used its relationship with Syria as a way to keep a foot in the Mediterranean. In return for propping up Bashar al-Assad's government during the brutal Syrian civil war, Moscow gained access to a critical naval facility at Tartus. That port gave Russian warships and submarines a rare lifeline outside their home waters, a forward base of operations in NATO's backyard. But political winds in Damascus have shifted. Russia's grip on Tartus is no longer secure, and its once reliable Mediterranean outpost is now under threat. Without Tartus, Russia's ability to sustain naval operations in the region weakens dramatically. And for a damaged submarine like the Novorossiysk, the consequences are dire. As Commodore Arjen Vanna of the Royal Netherlands Navy explained, losing that Syrian port effectively guts Russia's logistical safety net in the Mediterranean. Looking at what they're doing in the Mediterranean, losing a port there means losing logistical support, and that stretches the capabilities they have, which mainly come from the Northern Fleet, he said. In simpler terms, Russia doesn't just lose a base. It loses the ability to project power, resupply ships, and carry out rescues when things go wrong. And right now, things have gone very wrong. The Novorossiysk is stranded near the Strait of Gibraltar, and if Russia still controlled Tartus fully, it could have dispatched support vessels through the Mediterranean and Tyrrhenian seas to assist. But with Tartus slipping from Moscow's hands, that option is effectively gone. That leaves the submarine hanging in the water, trapped in one of the most watched maritime corridors in the world, while NATO silently observes every move. What was supposed to be a show of strength has instead turned into a showcase of just how fragile Russia's naval ambitions really are. Right now, Russia faces an almost comical problem. If it wants to send rescue ships to help the Novorossiysk, those vessels have to sail all the way around Europe, through the Baltic, past the North Sea, down through the Atlantic, just to reach a submarine stranded near Gibraltar. That's thousands of miles of travel, right under NATO's watchful eyes. And even if they make it there, it's not at all clear they'll have the right parts or the expertise to fix the breakdown. Think about how strange that is. You'd expect any submarine sent out into the world's oceans to carry spare parts for critical systems, especially something as essential as fuel, and to have at least one specialist on board who could repair it if things went wrong. The fact that the Novorossiysk apparently had neither speaks volumes. It suggests Western sanctions and Russia's own failing naval training program have eaten away at Moscow's military far more than Putin wants the world to realize. In other words, the Novorossiysk didn't just surface with a leak. It surfaced with a secret that Putin desperately wanted hidden. Russia's navy might not be the iron fist it pretends to be, but something much more fragile. And the truth is, doubts about Russia's naval strength existed long before this current fiasco. Back in August 2024, the national interest flat-out described Russia's navy as a paper tiger, a force that looked dangerous on paper but was far less capable in practice. Even earlier, in 2019, the same outlet pointed out a glaring weakness. Russia simply couldn't replace its aging submarines fast enough. That wasn't just a problem for its nuclear-powered subs. Its diesel-electric fleet, the Kilo class to which the Novorossiysk belongs, was in rough shape too. Most of Russia's 17-kilo class hunter-killer subs were built in the early 1990s. By naval standards, that makes them old workhorses, long past their prime. In theory, these boats were supposed to be modernized or replaced by newer designs. In practice, Russia lacked the parts, the money, and in some cases even the expertise to do it. These weren't issues that cropped up overnight. Analysts were flagging them over 6 years ago. Now pile on the extra strain of the Ukraine war and the punishing weight of Western sanctions. The cracks that were once hidden in technical reports are now playing out live on the world stage. Submarines with malfunctioning fuel systems, warships colliding with civilian vessels, panels falling off during overseas missions. Each one is another reminder that Russia's navy isn't holding together the way it should. That raises another unsettling possibility. The Novorossiysk may not have been sent into the Mediterranean as a fresh show of force. It may have been lurking there for months, silently shadowing NATO ships, before its systems finally gave out. If that's the case, NATO countries have been living with a broken, unpredictable threat in their backyard for much longer than anyone realized. And now, instead of quietly slipping back to port, the submarine has been forced to surface in humiliation, leaving Moscow scrambling to figure out how to save it, if it can be saved at all.